Welcome to SaaS-Story in the Making, the podcast that features the people who made the software world what it is today and the leaders who are shaping the future of technology. Here's your host, Matt Wallach.
Welcome to SaaS-Story in the Making. I am Matt, your host, and I am thrilled to be joined today by my special guest, Collin Stewart. We are going to talk all about Outbound and how you can get more leads by generating a really reliable, really repeatable outbound process. So Collin, thank you for coming.
Matt, happy to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know, Collin Stewart, this is the man when it comes to Outbound. He is the CEO of Predictable Revenue. And that's a company that has a framework that is based on the outbound process and the sales team that Aaron Ross created for Salesforce.com, which, by the way, added only an extra $100 million in revenue in just a few years. Many of you have heard about the book, of course, Predictable Revenue, written by Aaron Ross and Mary Lou Tyler. We will talk about that a little bit. But Collin's also got his own startup chops as well. He's the co-founder of Carburetor, which was a sales platform for SDRs, and he merged that with Aaron Ross to become Predictable Revenue and where he is now. He is also the president of the Vancouver chapter of the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So he knows his stuff. Collin, I am delighted to have you on the show. Welcome once again.
Well, thanks for that intro, Matt. I will add one thing in that Aaron and I are co-founder, co-CEO. It's his book. I was just a guy that kind of built the company around it. And then two, I'm not sure if I'm president of AAISP Vancouver anymore because we haven't really done anything in the last little while.
Kind of hard to do stuff these days.
Yeah, and like all our event stuff, we've been doing virtually live on YouTube. So that's where we put all our time and attention. We're not really doing anything in person anymore because I think it's just not relevant anymore.
Yeah, no kidding. It's kind of crazy times we live in, isn't it?
Totally. And I got to give you hell, man. Why is there no Canadian flag behind you there? What's going on?
Good question. So all of those are all my clients around the world. And for those of you listening on the podcast and not able to see on the video cast, there's a series of flags on my wall that I post for where my clients are. And there's flags from all over a lot of different continents. However, you're right, no Canadians. So for some reason, Canadians just haven't seen the love of what I'm delivering here.
Hey, that's fair. Nothing against Canadian. I am one myself. I'm married to one, and I've got a company of 55 out of 55, 60 of us. Half of us are Canadian. I do find Canadians hardest to sell to. Some people find them really easy to sell to. I have a strong preference to selling to Americans, and it's just a bigger market. It's simpler to focus on that one market first. And I definitely made the mistake of trying to sell only to Canadians in the early days. And I think that really compromised my revenue earning potential. Yeah.
That's interesting. I really do like Canadians. I grew up playing hockey, and so I got to know quite a lot of them for sure.
Good man.
Been up there all through BC and Trail and Burnaby and all the fun little towns. Newton, I think I can remember, but played all those different little towns where they just glorify hockey like crazy.
So are you from Bellingham then, or?
No, I'm actually from Colorado originally.
Oh, okay.
And just grew up playing hockey. Really enjoyed it. So I got to know quite a lot of Canadians, appreciate them. But I've only talked to like 2 or 3 about my gig. Most of my clients are in Europe or the US for some reason. Not sure why. Just don't really talk to Canadians. But someday we'll put a Canadian flag. We'll get that maple leaf up there.
There you go. Life goals.
Exactly. So I do want to ask you, what's been going on with Predictable Revenue lately and what's coming up for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, what's been going on? We built a company, like I said, 60 people. We're helping. Our goal is to basically help people build up on sales development teams, and like educate the market in general at like how best to grow a company. And that's 2 things where Aaron and I are super aligned on. And what we've been working on to accomplish that is really an update to the methodology. And it's not really an update. It's kind of what we've been living, but we realized we haven't really been communicating that to the market, to our followers, to our customers, to our people. And so there's a couple of things that we've noticed there's a pretty clear formula, and we haven't done a great job of keeping that updated. Because I think a lot of people look at Predictable Revenue and they're like, oh yeah, that was the book that talked about cold calling. That was cold calling 2.0, the cold email book. which is not incorrect. It is the book that made email or cold email a lot more popular. But I think the more critical part of the book was actually the specializing the sales roles piece and how that can create predictability in your revenue streams. So really we're focusing on how do we clearly communicate the core components that are critical to actually achieving predictable revenue. Because I know what your wheelhouse is. I think you'd be really happy that kind of this, like the first piece is basically, I feel like I'm beating around the bush. And so I'll talk about the formula really quickly and then I'll shut up
please
and
do.
let you
No,
contribute.
that's good. I want to hear it.
But basically it's, you grow the top of your funnel. So you need to create, you need meetings with customers who didn't know you, right? So you need to blow that up and have as many as you possibly can. Then the second piece is you need to manage each of those opportunities to the best possible outcome. And that involves, this is probably your wheelhouse, but it's like taking that first call. How do you convert that? And then what happens if there's no project in the next 90 days? How do you nurture that? And then it's all the support systems to like make sure that you're doing these things consistently. And then the last piece is just time. Because I think a lot of people, they might get some of the tactics right, but they're not seeing them in the right light. And so their framing of it makes it look like, oh, we tried predictable revenue, or we tried this. It's actually not even predictable revenue. It's, oh, we tried this growth channel and that growth channel didn't work out. And they saw results, but they were running into roadblocks and they didn't understand that like unknown unknowns. And so just the third piece is just sort of the time and understanding of like where you can really get stuck in the mud. Because there's a lot of things like I said, it's a formula, and it's, the number of net new meetings that you can generate multiplied by your quality at your quality of your sales process of like, how good are you at converting those meetings into customers? That's pretty easily measurable, multiplied by how much time you give it. And if you don't give it the appropriate amount of time and you're not thinking about things in the correct way, we see a lot of customers, they get great results and they don't realize it. They're like, oh, wow, well, it either took too long, or we're not saying this, we're not saying that. And it's like, well, it's great that you have those opinions, but like you are, if you were to stick with it, I've seen a number of cases where if they would have just stuck with it for another 6 months, they would have gone from, closing a deal to closing millions of dollars of deals. We've had a few customers, we've got to that stage of like, listen, hey, this, whether we're doing it for them or whether we're advising them, and they're like, hey, this isn't working. And I'm like, trust me, you give it another 6 months, you're going to be laughing. And those are the case study customers, because it takes time. It takes way longer than you expect. And the majority of people, they just don't have the patience. They don't have the time, the patience, the budget, the social capital. I understand and I empathize. Like, it's hard to get something done in a corporation today, especially in light of COVID and all this. I don't know when this is coming out, but like, I'm sure most people listening have either, they're pretty aware of the impact this has had on a lot of organizations. And so I empathize with the fact that trying to make a big investment in a long-term project is a challenging thing to do right now. And there are times where if you don't have sufficient budget, you probably shouldn't start at all, because to get 6-7 months in and say, oh, it didn't work, is sort of like starting off to push a big rock up a hill and knowing that it's a 2-mile climb to get to the top of the hill. And then getting to like mile 1.5 and be like, the rock isn't rolling downhill again. It's like, well, the peak is at that sort of 2-mile mark. So you got to keep pushing to the 2-mile mark. Then it starts rolling downhill. And I just see a lot of people stop pushing at the 1-mile mark and get crushed.
So true. So true. I actually literally just posted about this exact thing, 2-3 days ago, something like that. I posted on LinkedIn and I said, a lot of the times when I talk to founders, and I work with a lot of founders around the world, a lot of times when I talk to them, they get really down on themselves. And they get really kind of upset that a certain marketing channel didn't work. And I asked them, how long have you been doing it? Oh, about 2 weeks. And I start saying, what, 2 weeks? Are you kidding me? Like, you need to devote some time to this thing. First of all, even if it is something that could work, at the beginning, you're going to be very raw and new and rookie at it. And you're not going to be able to get the types of results that you will get once you kind of start to learn and tweak and iterate and become better and better at what you're doing, at honing that skill, at that craft. And so, I mean, too many times I see people changing and shifting away from something that could be very, very helpful, very relevant for their business. So, I wonder if it's kind of the whole thing of pivot has become very, very, very in vogue. It's everybody's talking about pivot this and pivot that, and maybe that's kind of in everybody's head. Yes, you should pivot if something. Absolutely, if you see an opportunity, you should be able to pivot to that. However, make sure you fully fleshed out what you were doing previously, so you don't leave money on the table. Just hearing you say that you've got some clients who could have left millions of dollars on the table, that's super scary. So I completely agree, Collin.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's a combination of like the pivot mentality and it's the data-driven mentality. And everybody's data-driven these days. And you're like, okay, well, it's okay to be data-driven, but you don't have any basis for like your data being accurate, right? You can look at your cost per meeting for the first 6 months of starting a new team, but you don't know, like you said, you're doing so many things wrong. You're not measuring how effective the channel is. You're measuring how good of a job you've done, implementing the revenue system or that particular channel. And I'd argue it's generally going to take, I don't know, longer than you expect. I think people give themselves, myself included, and probably myself more than anybody else, I give myself too much credit in terms of how smart I think I am and how quickly I can figure out a channel. Whether it's outbound or inbound or ads or YouTube or whatever it is. And so there's no room for, and I think they take that at the beginning, at the outset, when they plan these things and they say, okay, well, I'm going to go to management and say, okay, well, I think I can turn around and be producing, 10 meetings, 20 meetings, 30 meetings, 50 meetings a month by month 7. And then when you get to month 7 and you're producing 8 good ones a month, you've failed in the eyes of your boss, and you haven't got any ROI. And it's like, well, we know you're not going to get ROI by that time. Like if you think about the nature of outbound, and I'm deep into this. And so I've been sort of, I don't know, a little philosophical about it lately, but if you think about outbound, right? Or if I start with inbound, right? People are motivated to do something, right? There's that motivation because they've clicked on something. Whether it's a white paper or a PDF they downloaded or they filled out a web capture form, they did some action. So they're at least problem aware. The thing that inbound reps have to focus on, or AEs that handle inbound deals, you have to focus on qualifying, right? They have motivation, but they're not necessarily qualified, right? And if anybody that's listening that's dealt with inbound leads, this is exactly where it is. You're going to get people from all over the map.
For sure.
With outbound, it's the opposite. People are more likely, I say more likely because you can never be 100% sure, but they're more likely to be qualified because you did your research and you picked those accounts. And so you're saying, well, based on our past customers, here's the ones that were the best. Here's other companies that look like them. Let's go see if they're going to get similar value to our customers. So they're more likely to be, but not guaranteed to be qualified. But I can almost guarantee you that there's no motivation because it's just, there's only a certain percentage of the total market that's in a sort of air quotes buying mode at any point in time. And the likelihood of you landing on that exact person in their first 3 months, it's possible. It's not outside. It's not impossible. It's just not likely. And so so when you look at that and you say, okay, well, with outbound, we're reaching out to all these people. And let's say like, who knows what the exact number? I've heard 7%, I've heard 2%, I've heard 10%. Well, let's just say 5% of the market, of your whole market is in a buying mode at any particular time. That's still 1 in 20, right? Like that's still, if you're generating 10 meetings a month, that's still 95% of those meetings that aren't going to go anywhere this quarter. And I think there's too many people, if I can stand on a soapbox and rant for a second, there's too many people that look at outbound or look at any channel and say, this individual has to have a project in the next 90 days. And I think if there's anything that's great that comes out of us talking more about account-based, I think there's a lot of people trying to sell software and tools. And so that kind of distracts from the message. I think one of the best things, and if you like, when you read Predictable Revenue, Aaron's always been account-based, but we didn't really use that language. But when you look at accounts and you look at outbound, it's about developing that account. And the best part about outbound is you find out who are the right people to talk to at this account and do they have this pain, right? They may not have a need right now, and they may not have a timeline, or they may not have budget. But what you're really looking for, if I can come back to BANT, and I said it incorrectly, but you're looking for the right people and you're looking for some sort of pain, right? So authority and need, right? They're not going to have timeline and budget. And so the crux of the reason why people fail to generate revenue from new channels. And I don't think it's specific to Outbound, but I've experienced this specifically through the context of Outbound, is they look at these new meetings. They say, okay, well, you're booking, our SDR team booked 20 meetings this month and only 1 in 5, like, cause we're using that, 5% example, only 1 in 5 is actually a good one. Right. And they look at it in the snapshot of the first 6 months. Well, like just mathematically, there's only going to be a few that are really actual good ones in those first 6 months. The value in Outbound and doing Outbound, or having, any sort of team reaching out and finding these new accounts to talk to, is you get to figure out who are the right people at these accounts and do they have pain, right? Are they in pain? It doesn't matter if they want to solve that pain right now, but are they in a little bit of pain? And then as you grow, you're developing this accounts list as an account executive, or however you structure your teams, but you're developing this list of accounts. You know the right person, and you know that there's some pain there. And then you can slowly work those opportunities over a long period of time, whether you call them working opportunities or nurturing accounts. You need to be staying in touch with these individuals. And if you do this over the course of a year, you're going to get a crazy, crazy, crazy amount of value out of it. But what happens is most people look at it and say, well, we did this for 6 months and we only got 2 opportunities and 1 of them closed. So we barely made our money back on hiring these SDRs. So it's not worth it. And what you don't see is the value in all of that pipeline that you've created. And what you don't see, and this is where I think the biggest place where a lot of people fall down, is that the account execs or whoever's closing the revenue, and I'm not trying to blame it on the account exec. And it's not like, I'm not trying to say, oh, sales development reps are great. There are a lot of times where sales development reps book crappy meetings, but let's assume that they're booking good meetings. There's a lot of times where account execs are treating those meetings the exact same way as if they were an inbound. And what you see, if you're expecting an inbound and you get an outbound meeting and you don't know the context and you haven't been trained on how to do this, you're going to think, oh, that one's shit because there's no motivation, right? And by nature, we know this. And so the other big mistake is people assuming that they're the same as they're the same as inbound marketing generated leads, opportunities, meetings, whatever you want to call them. And they treat them the same, and they don't coach their teams or build process for, this is how you actually work and develop an outbound opportunity. This is how long it takes. And I think that's really the crux of why a lot of people are trying these new channels, and they're just trying something. And then you hear like, I tried everything and nothing worked. It's like, yeah, it wasn't the channel, it was you. And that's uncomfortable and it's hard. And I'm not trying to put the blame and push the blame to people. I have screwed up this so many times. And I empathize. It's hard to know when to invest and when not to invest. And it's hard to know when a vendor is just trying to tell you something so that you'll stick around for another couple months, or when they're trying to tell you something because they honestly, genuinely believe that that's the best practice and that's the right way forward. And it's challenging to figure out who to listen to. I totally appreciate all of those things. So I'll shut up for a second there, Matt, throw it back to you. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's great. It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. And I completely agree that there's a definite need for those results right away. We live in a right now world, and you're wanting to see, hey, I invested in this. I've been investing in this for a few months. Why am I not seeing anything? What's happening? And there's always that unknown of, are we just not doing it right? Are we just not waiting long enough? And it's super, super, scary for a founder, being a former founder myself. I understand. I've been making these calls and trying to put these in play. It's really, really difficult. What I want to ask you is, if you decide, hey, outbound is a strategy for us, which a lot of companies believe, what are the advantages of outsourcing that versus getting a team yourself in-house?
Yeah, good question. And I want to be super clear here. There's advantages and disadvantages to both, and there is no one right way. So I can't say, oh, you absolutely should outsource your business to us and let us build a team for you, because that's not true. There's one path where you have, so there's that path of like, okay, we can go the outsource route. There's the other path where we can build it ourselves. And then there's the other path where it's like, hey, outbound doesn't make sense for us as a business. And so starting with outbound doesn't make sense for us as a business. It's probably companies that have deal sizes that are less than $20,000 a year. I've seen people make it profitable at less. It just gets harder. In that sort of 10 to 20K, it's possible. It's within the realm of possibilities, but the numbers are just going to be tighter, right? The numbers are just going to be harder. And market wise, only only B2B. I haven't seen this work in B2C. I'm not saying I don't think it would work. Just not my wheelhouse, not something I have experience in.
I mean, that's the old boiler room thing, just calling people up asking for investment, right? That's
Yeah.
the only B2C I can think of, or any call you get on your cell phone for whatever.
Totally. I mean, I've seen sort of a sales development approach for talent, for trying to source investors, advise companies to buy, things like that. Like I've talked to PE firms that are doing basically outbound with sales development reps for.
Most of our people are B2B listeners anyway. So
yeah, perfect.
That's fine.
So brings us back to the first two, which is like, when should I outsource it versus when should I build it internally? And I think what you want to look at is the sort of time horizons that you're like the resources that you have available. And I break resources into financial resources and human resources, not HR, but just like the people on the team. Do you have the people on the team? If you're a startup and you're growing, and all this is going to be modulated on like the rate at which you are growing. If you're a Series A, Series B backed founder, you're going to have a different strategy than if you're a bootstrap company, right?
For sure.
A lot of my experience comes from, we're a bootstrap company. We're 55 people. We grew from like $0 to $5-6 million in 6 years. So like not an ultra fast growing company. And we've worked with customers that are hyper growth, that are trying to, is it triple, double? We've worked with them, and what they're going to do is very different. And so if you're sitting there, I would look at, what are the resources I have available? Can I go and hire that AAA VP of sales? Can I also go and afford to build a sales development organization? Do I have $500,000 in the bank? So if I'm thinking DIY, I want to build it internally. I'm probably thinking budgetary wise, probably about $500,000 a year. Is what I'd set aside for a proper sales development team.
At the minimum.
At the minimum, yeah. And this is a year, and it's probably going to take you 2 years to get your money back on that investment. So you're going to put $1 million into this channel, and by the end of 2 years, you'll probably have your money back and more. But
if you do it right,
but it's going to look like. It's going to look like nothing for the first 12 months. And then you'll start to see things tick over and slowly build and build and build and build. And I've definitely seen people build it faster. I know there are people out there that can, get closed deals, but a lot of it's going to depend on your sale, and a lot of it's going to depend on your sales cycle. If we're talking about a $25,000 ACV, SaaS service, it's going to be much different than $1.5 million, enterprise sale. So
no doubt,
the numbers definitely shift there. So like, why would you want to do it yourself? I think most people eventually are going to want to do it themselves. Like, I think sales is a core function of the company, and I don't think you want to outsource your core as a long-term strategy. I don't think that makes a ton of sense. And so if you have the money up front, and you have access to the people to do it, I would do it internally. Now, along the way, would I seek some help to accelerate things, to find people like Matt to help us push through roadblocks? Like, we have a coaching team that focuses on outbound specifically. And like, obviously, like, I'm a fan of, going to people like us, and there's a bunch of others like us that will help you make sure that you don't stumble on those roadblocks, because you very well could get to a point where you've spent 2 years and you haven't got any value out of it, because you've got a couple little sneaky things in the formula that are multiplying all your efforts by 0. And this is totally possible. And when you have these unknowns, it's hard to see them, because it's, you're coming at it from, if you're not coming from sales and you're not coming from sales development, you haven't built one of these, it's hard to know what are the things that are really critical and how does everything play together. And I'm not trying to convince people not to outsource or not to use our sales development services, where we build and hire our team SDRs for you. Because I do think our team provides a lot of value. And so when I think about like, why would I go with an outsourced company where I'm getting them to help me build that team? It's when I don't have access. I have access to cash, but maybe not $1 million over 2 years. And I don't have access to sales development talent on my team. If you don't have that, if you don't know how to hire somebody that has sales development talent, or manage somebody that has sales development talent, it's very challenging to get that experience. And so hiring somebody that you respect, that does a good job, will help you get that baseline. Like as an example, we're trying to build out our customer success function. And so we talked about, okay, well, should we hire somebody? Should we not hire somebody? And we have, from a pure, like, I've got a ton of account management experience and sort of like building teams and managing people. But from a pure customer success, our team doesn't have that many people on it that have pure customer success management team building experience. And so from my perspective, we're going to hire a consultant. We're going to hire somebody to do that for us for a couple of months. So we get a taste, we get a feel for it. We get to know what good looks like. We get to know what bad looks like. We get to form our opinions. We've got some texture to make to formulate our decisions. And so coming back to outbound, why would I focus on, or like, why would somebody hire an outbound team to do it for them, is if you don't have access to that sales development talent, you don't know how to hire a sales development rep. And you don't want to have to hire a sales development manager, build the tool stack yourself, figure out how to do all the data, how to pipe all the data. Like, to do it right, you need a sales development manager. You need a portion of a sales ops person. You need a portion, and the sales ops person is to stitch together your sales loft, outreach, Salesforce, all those tools, and the data pipeline to make sure your data is getting into the right places, and the SDRs have all the data. The enablement person is making sure they have all the right messaging, and that they're actually like, they have that, they're trained, they understand it, they're trained, they're being advanced. So ops, enablement, a manager, just to make sure the plant, like the program is going. And then like some sort of leader to help you figure out that's been there, done that before. To help you avoid those roadblocks. So like, if you're able to afford all of those things and you can find good people in your company, you can find good people, go and do that. If you want some help you can't afford to do all of that and invest the $500,000 a year, then I would go and say, okay, well, let's get a team. And basically what we do is like a fractional, you get a full-time SDR and then fractional management services sort of around that to make sure that the SDR is supported, because not everybody needs and can justify a $500,000 a year team.
Yeah, it seems like a much quicker way. It seems like a smarter strategy early on, but for earlier stage companies who need to get that outbound, but don't have all the pieces, like you said, don't have the cash, or don't have expertise in-house for the management side, which a lot of people forget. I think it's so awesome that you brought that up, because a lot of people say, oh, I'm just going to hire an SDR and I'm still going to be over here doing my thing of building out the product or figuring out marketing. And we'll just hope that SDR all on their own figures everything out. And I don't think that's realistic.
No, that's not a sustainable model. And I see so many people make that mistake, even friends of mine. And I'm like, guy, what are you doing? So I'll flip it back. Like, you've got a bunch of founders that are listening. This is a SaaS podcast. So I'm imagining you've got a mix of founders that come from sort of sales and marketing to like product and engineering. And so if you're on the product and engineering side and you're thinking, oh, this guy is not making sense. Imagine you're starting an engineering team, and your approach to building your whole product is to say, you know what, I want to do some engineering. I'm going to hire one junior developer. I'm going to give them the object-oriented programming guidelines and an intro to Ruby book. And I'm going to say, go nuts. And I'm going to work this off the side of my desk while I'm the product manager. And like, how good of a job is that junior developer going to be at building a real proper development organization within your company? Right.
Well, I think just to play the analogy further, like what we talked about earlier, how people give up too soon. After he produces little to nothing in a month or two, and you're like, this is garbage, or he shows you the first rough draft, you're going to say, oh, this is horrible. I'm completely shifting away from this entire strategy, which means same thing. If you do that with an SDR and you realize it's not working, it's because you didn't put in the right tools, the right framework to make it happen.
Exactly. And I'm sure there are people that have done precisely that. I don't think this is a problem that's unique to outbound in any particular way. I think it's something that's, I don't know, in general, that's uniquely human that we do, where we overestimate our abilities and we underestimate how long it's going to take to do things. And I think we see that pretty commonly with software development. I know I've been on the wrong side of estimating software development timelines many times.
Me too, my friend. Me too.
It's the same thing. But I think I think there's just more of a hire and fire mentality when it comes to the sales folks, right? Like there's there's no way that if a developer wasn't producing like X lines of code, and I know that's a terrible way of measuring a developer, and I would never like, it's just a bad example, but you would never say, oh, you didn't push out X number of lines of code. You're fired, right? We're going to bail on this. And maybe that's not the perfect example, but that's sort of the analogy I went with, is that, yeah, you really need to invest in these things, and you really need somebody there to help you along the way. And whether that's somebody to do it for you a little bit, or whether that's somebody like Matt that's just going to help you make sure you don't miss those roadblocks, or somebody like my co-founder Aaron, who's been there, done that before, to like come through and like help lay out the methodology and show you sort of the formula. Like whatever you do, I think owning that you need a little help, whether it's sales development or building a product organization, is probably a first really good step. But then, so below that, there's all the tactical stuff we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. We are running out of time here, but real quick, Collin, can you let me know what's going on with your upcoming virtual conference, Own Your Growth?
For sure. So it is September 17th. We're doing a virtual conference. We had a few thousand people at the last one. It was very exciting. Lots of great speakers. We've got myself and Aaron are actually going to be going deeper on the predictable revenue methodology. I'm totally drawing a blank on the rest of the speakers. I've got like a big speaker list, and I can't remember who we have confirmed yet. And I'm embarrassed. I might have to shoot you guys a link.
No worries. Well, we can put the link in the show notes too.
Your growth. I'm pulling it up right now because I think our team actually just launched and they just sent me the speaker. Like we've got a promo video out on Friday. And I'm looking at our site, and we still have the old speaker list. So I apologize, I don't know. But we're doing some pretty cool things. We've got basically we're streaming it all on YouTube, and so we're trying to make it really interactive that way. But we also have a Slack community where we're doing some pretty interesting things to try and bring the people together. We're doing a lot of like community generated networking sessions to try and replicate that feeling of walking around in the hallways and saying, oh, I overheard a conversation of somebody's talking about product, or I overheard a conversation where somebody was talking about sales development, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're trying to recreate that feel a little bit.
That's cool.
And bring the community together. And so that's September 17th. You can check out Predictable Revenue. It's at predictablerevenue.com, or you can just search for Own Your Growth. We're also on YouTube, and we're going to be streaming it there. And so that's where I'll be. That's where we'll be taking comments and questions and all that stuff.
That's fantastic. That sounds really, really cool. Like a great event coming up. So like I said, I will put all that in the show notes. And once again, we've been talking with Collin Stewart from Predictable Revenue. Collin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on the show, Matt.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. And for everybody else, we will see you next time. Bye-bye.